I never really do super hard workouts that often now. Whereas before, that was if I wasn't finishing a session with a flat out last rep, then it wasn't a good session.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon is like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. WARWICKRUNS on Instagram, YouTube. Really happy to have you here. If you are new to the podcast, welcome to the Marathon Podcast, your podcast for everything running and your companion on your runs. I hope that you're out running now, that you're enjoying whatever you are doing. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. Really appreciate you being here. I haven't asked you guys in a while, but please head over to the app that you're listening to, subscribe or follow this podcast. Also, head over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel there. There's going to be a bit more content there, not just the podcast episodes, but also some videos like race videos and other things. Again, thank you so much for all the engagement and the feedback on the Boston Marathon episode that was launched earlier this week. It's so much fun building up to this race, and I can't wait to have more guests on, having some of the really fast Boston Marathoners on eventually to share their experiences and their training for the Boston Marathon. I also received some more questions, and I can't wait to answer those in the next episodes. In today's episode, we're having Alfie Manthorpe with us, and he's had quite the year. If you are on social media and you're into running and you're following runners, I'm sure you are either following him or his content has popped up. I am so happy to have him on the podcast. I've been wanting to have him on for so long, and finally he's here. And he shared some things that I just am so happy that he did share, because I can't wait for you guys to hear about it. Especially those three things that kind of got him from a bit of a rut in terms of running for a few years, and then led to him getting back to running and now being one of the fastest Brits at the moment. He also is planning on doing a marathon this spring, and I can't wait to see how that goes. So, really excited to share this episode with you. And before we do, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. One thing, just reminding you that you can get 20% off an annual subscription with Strava just by using the code Christian, or look at the show notes down below. You can also get a discount on red light therapy, the FlexBeam, by hitting the link down below. A couple of other things that I want to talk about. I usually try to update you guys on my own running. And the other day, I had such a good workout. And it's obviously fun to share that things are going well. But what I want to talk about is that I was using my lactate monitor, was doing some testing. And honestly, I've had times lately where I've been feeling like maybe me saying that I'm running a threshold is not actually the threshold. Maybe I'm just feeling good at higher intensity, and then I'm fooling myself, and again, then I'm fooling you guys when saying that I'm so much better. But the other day when I was running and having my 8x K, I felt really good, but I was like, what is my lactate? So I tested every other repetition, and it was super low. You can head over to my Strava if you want to see how that workout went. But it's just that those lactate values were so low. And then I talked to John yesterday, and we were kind of chatting about this workout and how nice it is to have a lactate monitor to be able to monitor and make sure that the values are low enough. I think that one of the things that, at least to me, is like the most crucial with my training is to make sure that my intensity is where it's supposed to be. Like if I go too hard, I know that it won't end well. And this is actually some of the things that I also talked to Alfie about, especially in terms of just staying true to that intensity, both at threshold, but also easy runs. And like he said, he feels like his easy runs are actually getting slower and slower with the years. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Not obviously, again, like fun to share that things are going well for me, but also because I think that it's really important for all of us to do those tests every now and then to make sure where you are. Kind of like what Cat Hall in the last episode was talking about, like finding your baseline and making sure that your zones, your intensity is based on that. And speaking of that episode, a really fun one, a great one, but also helped me a lot. On my easy runs the last couple of days, I've really felt the difference and I'm pushing myself to run even slower. And it's almost embarrassing to say because I feel like I've been preaching low intensity runs for so long. But finally, I feel like I've managed how to do them. And today it just felt better than ever. So, really excited about that. And also really excited that I get to kind of test these things and share it with you just immediately. Okay, so that is like an update on my own running, all of that. And then last thing before we jump into the episode, I'm not going to interrupt you with any ads or anything like that. So just reminding you that the marathon hat is now for sale, white and black, a black version in addition to this white one. Just go or head over to the marathonpodcast.com and order yours today. Also very, very happy about the deal with DHL that makes it possible to ship just within like 1 to 3 days. I shipped a hat yesterday or 2 days ago, and it's being delivered in Texas today. So very excited about that. And I'm sorry about the shipping price. Like, not much I can do about it unless I'm just gonna lose or want to lose money on this. And again, first 300 hats that I'm selling, the profit will go back to the Marathon Podcast sponsorship. Okay, with that, 6-7 minutes of me rambling. Let's talk to Alfie and focus on this one because it's a really, really good one. Alfie, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. Finally, we've been chatting for a long time. I'm so happy to finally have you here.
No, I'm happy to be here. I apologize for the delay on my behalf. I'm the most useless person ever at replying to messages and organizing podcasts. So it's actually one of my New Year's resolutions to arrange more podcasts, or at least stick to coming on. So I'm glad I could finally reply in a good time and that we could get it done.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really appreciate the quick turnaround. I think I texted you this morning and you were like, what about tonight? So that's good. And honestly, I was thinking about it this morning that I'm happy that we waited because I've been so excited to have you on. I've been following you for a long time and I think that this is going to be a very popular episode and it's nice to like have the podcast at a bit of a different level than it was when I first reached out to you. So before you introduce yourself, where are you at right now? Like we briefly talked about it before, but you're on a training camp. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Sierra Nevada in the mountains in Spain. It's the highest I've ever been altitude wise. So it's pretty rough at the minute, but I'm slowly getting used to it and all the other amazing things that you get from altitude, like really dry skin and lack of sleep and needing the bathroom every 2 minutes. It's great. So yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time to get fitness, hopefully. But other than that, it's pretty dull up here.
Yeah, we briefly talked about that before we started recording that being where you are right now, like in Sierra Nevada. If at least I haven't been there myself, but I've been to places where it feels like there's not that much to do other than training. Uh, how are you coping with that lifestyle, like being on a training camp and kind of just focusing on training and that's it?
Do you know? I actually really like that kind of grind anyway at home, and I'm used to training solo. Whereas here, there's also some people who I'm out with, or I guess not explicitly. I didn't come out with them specifically, but you know, there's people who are here who I'm training with and doing things with. So it's a lot more manageable when you've got other people also in the same boat as you. But at the end of the day, you've come here for a purpose, and it's just as long as that's in the back of your mind, it's pretty easy to see through 3 weeks because I'm only here for 3 weeks. If it was 6 weeks, I'd already probably questioned what I was doing up here, but it's not that long of a time, so it's okay.
Yeah. I want to ask you more about the altitude and the reasons behind why you're doing that now. But before we do, why don't you present yourself? I mean, I've been getting messages from people actually throughout this podcast journey where they're like, "You need to have Alfie on," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm very excited to have him on because of like the workouts that I've seen that you had on like your Instagram, but also the races that you've done. It's been quite a year for you, I think. So, why don't you present yourself?" Who you are as a runner and outside of running, and also like a little bit of your PRs at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm Alfie, 26 years old from the UK. I've been running basically all my life. I'm pretty sure it's 18, 19 years at this point, which it's probably a little too long in terms of running too much when I was younger, and that kind of led to some issues when I was younger. But other than that, yeah, just been in love with the sport for as long as I can remember, regardless of if that's competing or watching it. Outside of running, I wish I had something prepared because I'm not actually as boring as I sound, but I'm terrible at thinking up things on the spot, so I do apologize. There's definitely things I enjoy doing, you know, going for coffees, films, TV series, gaming, whatever. Like I like doing all that stuff. Um, Personal bests at the minute are 27:38 in the 10K and 61:26 in the half marathon. And then the others aren't quite worth talking about if in the same breath as those. So I'll leave it at that. The shorter distance ones aren't as good, at least by my new standards, I guess, this year.
Well, it is the marathon podcast, so it's totally fine that we're focusing on the longer distances. Um, i- you have a half marathon, and had some very convincing workouts, like at least that I've been following, like when I've been seeing them. Uh, do you have any plans of doing a marathon in the future?
I'm 99% sure I'll be doing a marathon in April.
Awesome. Do you have one specific one planned already?
Uh, Everything but officially confirmed. Yes, there is a specific
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that will be a lot of fun, and I guess like then it will be that can kind of be the foundation for a lot of the things that we're talking about. Not necessarily about the race specifically, but your training and everything that you're doing. And I guess it also then makes sense with some of the workouts and the runs that I've seen you doing. Before we talk about your training and everything like that, you mentioned that you've been running for a very long time. Do you remember like when you fell in love with running, or the first time like when you started running?
Yeah, it was cross country in school in year 3, which I can't even remember, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I wasn't the best, but I was pretty good because I did a lot of other sports and all my family ran. So I think in the first cross country race I came 16th in Sheffield, so my city, and then progressed a bit more, got a bit better. I wouldn't say I kind of fell in love with it or enjoyed it more. I guess my earliest memory is probably the Berlin World Championships off the top of my head, where Bolt broke the 200 and 100 world record. That's like the first thing I can remember where I actually watched it as a fan. But I've been competing a few years before that, but I didn't really, I guess I wasn't old enough to appreciate like watching the sport itself because it's not really exactly in your face. You've kind of got to find it, haven't you? So
Yeah.
that took a bit longer, but yeah, a big part of my life I've been watching and competing.
What was your progression like after like that cross when you started running cross country and up until now? Has it you did mention that you had some struggles at some point there. What was your journey like?
So that first year, I didn't win a race, and then the year after, I won pretty much all the same races that I competed in the year before, and then the year after that, the same again. Just that was obviously just at a city level, and then I started competing at a national level, and I was probably in the top 10, I think, for my age, but not at the top. Um, and that kind of stayed the same in the top 10, top 20 until I was maybe 15, and then I stagnated for maybe 4 years where I just got basically I didn't improve for 4 years, and obviously 15 to 18 and 19, that's kind of years where you grow and you should progress a lot, and I just stayed the same. So that was probably partly overtraining as a kid or doing the wrong things, and then also not adapting and innovating my training from there. And it was up until I kind of moved coaches and then decided to start learning about the sport and why you do the training you do. That's when I started getting better again. But there was a lot of time in there where I wasn't a very good athlete compared to what I had been previously as a kid, and then I guess now or the last few years as well.
But how was that? Because I think that, to a lot of, I guess you're still a kid when you're 15, right? Like that is also where you usually see that shift in hobbies, lifestyle. A lot of kids will go out partying more, like prioritizing that. And especially if you're starting to have less progress, like your results are not where you want them to be, it's easier to maybe fall into that, okay, I'm done with sports. So why do you think it is that you were able to still keep going and not give up running at that time?
I think it was probably because I was a fan of the sport as well. So I'd do it as a hobby, even if I wasn't trying to compete or at a top level. So I think from ages like 15 and onwards, for the rest of my teenage years, I kind of had in my head that I'm never going to make a GB team. I'm never going to run these times, but I'm still just going to train and compete and see how good I can get. But I really didn't think I'd ever be like good enough again to it'd be worthwhile in terms of actually putting the effort in or having a career in. I never thought be a pro athlete. So I think the reason I stayed in it was purely just from a fan perspective of the sport. The same reason someone might play football on a weekend or any other sport that people do. It was never really the pursuit of trying to be an elite athlete.
But did it at all change your perspective or your approach to the sport? Do you have more of a laid back relationship to running at the time, or did it kind of make you more motivated to find a solution to that lack of progress, if you want?
I think I was always like committed in trying to be the best runner possible. It's just I think even if I'm motivated, I wasn't motivated doing the right things. So until I kind of learned what I had to be doing and what I needed to do, it was almost just doing things for the sake of doing things or working hard for the sake of working hard. It was not actually in a good direction. Um, which I guess so I kind of had the same work ethic then as I do now. Obviously, it's evolved a bit. I have to run a lot more now, but it was never not there. It was just probably going in the wrong places.
Yeah. I feel like obviously facing this at 15 is very different than facing this at, say, 30 or 40. But I think that a lot of people, especially new runners, whether that is like a new marathon runner or a new 10K runner, they might face these things. And as soon as you face that, it can be really hard to know how do you get out of it or snap out of it. And at least in my experience, you learn so much. Like it could be running easier for your easy runs, whatever works for you or whatever is the thing that you're doing that you shouldn't do. But for you back then, you said that you kind of realized what you needed to do. What was it that you saw back then that, oh, this is what I'm not doing, or this is what I need to do in order to get back on track?
It was probably just building the whole like complete like ticking the boxes of every single aspect of training. Because before maybe I was like really one dimensional as I do these hard sessions and I run and that's it. That's what I saw training as. And then obviously now focus on building volume, gym, core, doing every single different type of adaptation to try and become the best runner. So it was just learning that process of how do you optimize aerobic fitness, how do you optimize mechanics, and it was just and then applying that consistently. It was never the question of working to apply stuff. It was just knowing what to apply. But a lot of that came from researching about Ingebrigtsen's training, Marius back, and at the same time, when I moved to my other coach, he started implementing more volume, and I instantly saw improvements from that. And then it was just an evolution from there, where obviously you never stop learning. But with doing work on my social media as well on Traxer, I had to interview a lot of athletes, did a lot of research, made a lot of videos, and that definitely helped as well. Pick up all the information, and at the same time, obviously, like use that information on myself and see what works and see what didn't for me. And then it's just been a constant, I guess, adaptation of that from there on out. And now, obviously, it's evolved to a lot of volume, mostly, almost all of the time. And then now that's still getting tweaked and figuring out how I can really optimize the adaptations that I get, or I guess optimize them whilst also reducing the risk of being injured or ill or fatigued.
Yeah. Are there any very specific things that, like looking back, whether that is at that age from 15 to 19 or after that, things that you're like, these are maybe the most important things that I've learned in terms of, say, staying free of injuries, because that is obviously building the mileage that you're at or the paces you are, especially maybe the pace because of the mechanical load. It can be hard to stay free of injuries. Are there any things that you've learned that are like, oh, this was key?
Probably three things, and that is eat a lot more food around, especially around training. So carbs pre, during, and post, and then protein straight away. That was a massive one. Like fueling correctly, wearing the appropriate footwear all the time. Before, I mean, back then anyway, there wasn't that many good running shoes anyway. But making sure that there's a good cushion underfoot if I'm going easy, and not always wearing spikes all the time. Just really trying to reduce the load where possible. Now it's changed a bit, which I'll have to get onto after this, but it was very much build as safely as possible, and that was also protecting the body as much as possible. And then thirdly was training paces. My easy run has actually got slower every year since I've got, like, in the last 5 years I've been running slower. But then also that applies for training. I never really do super hard workouts that often now, whereas before that was, if I wasn't finishing a session with a flat out last rep, then it wasn't a good session. So things have changed quite a lot, but they're definitely the biggest three, I think.
If we touch on that last one first, I find all of these three very interesting, and thanks for sharing that. I think that that can be very useful for runners of like all levels, but also for any distance. But that last one, do you think that that comes with you getting wiser and smarter about your training, or is it also a part of you expanding to longer distances and not really needing that high intensity as much? Like with a half marathon compared to a 5K, for instance, you'll probably need less of that super high intensity.
Yeah, I'd say any distance across the board, if during the base phase, it would apply directly, and regardless of if I was doing whatever distance, that would still apply. But then obviously, again, building for a half marathon and a marathon is quite a lot easier to manage the load and not risking too much in terms of those really intense sessions. Um, but I think still, even though as I prepare for a 10K or 5K, or to be honest, a half and a marathon, I will still implement those to try and tick that box off as I get closer, because it's still mechanical fitness. But then you look at other ways that you can get that. So hill repeats probably a bit safer than sprinting on the flat or doing strides or plyometrics. It's learning ways that you can optimize mechanics and also reduce the risk that you have on injury. Again, if I was training for a 5K or a 3K, it would look a bit different, but the same principle applies. It's just probably proportionate, where you combine the load of the volume that you're running and the intensity. If I was
Mhm.
training for a shorter distance race and running less volume, then I could probably afford a bit more intensity as well.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the nutrition and the fueling. And I think that this was, at least to me, maybe the biggest shock because as a runner, if you look at the hours, obviously you are up at much, like you have more hours than most runners who are running just occasionally. But still, I think that it's easy to think that, oh, I'm just running like 5 times a week and it's just like an hour every time. I don't need that much food. I'm just going to use this as my way of losing weight, but I'm also going to try to perform. And I remember having this moment where I was like, well, I feel pain every time I'm running by having this approach.
Yep.
And I remember that there was like a moment where things clicked and I was like, okay, I need to eat more, and things kind of changed. How clear was that change for you? Like when you started focusing more on this, and how, like, how how did it feel for you? Could you like feel it almost immediately when you started changing the perspective on this?
Yeah, I can remember the biggest change. The realization was probably I was doing like fasted long runs, and I can remember I was looking back and I was like, I always seem to get ill after a long run, and I was like, oh wait, what am I doing before that long run? Not eating any fuel. Uh, so that was an obvious thing for me, but also I had some blood sugar problems and some other medical problems with my thyroid. Um, so during that time, I was really struggling to train um, well at all. And I got a nutritionist, and speaking to them just drastically changed my outlook on nutrition. And in my training group, I was probably the only one who had a carb mix during the session and had the carbs before the session and after. And a lot of the time, people would complain like, "Oh, I was feeling really good, and then I felt terrible," or the classic bonking and things like that. And I was like, I think I literally must have had months on end of just perfect sessions, and it was such an obvious change. Um, and since then, obviously, I've not looked back and probably amplified it even more. But I think it's probably the biggest difference that if someone wanted to instantly change their running overnight, there's not many things that would do it, but correct nutrition would 100% make a massive impact, even on the adaptations as well. Like if you fuel better and recover better, then you're going to get more from your training session. So it's literally free fitness.
Yeah.
But I think there's obviously a toxic mindset around being lighter and trying to lose weight. But I always say I'd rather be like a healthy and fueled runner than a lighter but underfueled one, because you're never going to be able to perform how you're supposed to.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that. I'm obviously not even close to your level, but I've really felt that at times where I'm eating a lot and I can almost be like, oh, I probably shouldn't have had that much food this last week. And now I'm not talking about in terms of just weight, just like just how I'm feeling throughout the day. I'm like, oh, I had too much. But I have noticed that that's usually when I'm feeling the best during my runs. And I might be a couple of kilos heavier than I was when I was supposed to feel better, right? Like because oh, I'm lighter, I'm at like my perfect weight. But then when I'm fueling enough, then I feel better and I have more energy, which obviously like if you look at it from the outside, it all makes sense because you have more energy and that will give you more. But it I think like you said, it's a toxic thing or attitude that a lot of runners might take on. But I also think that it can come from maybe the approach of like you are obviously running to really perform, but a lot of people might fall in love with running through the fact that they are trying to lose weight and that's why they're running. And then they are hooked and then they keep that, oh, I need to fuel less. And it just becomes a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think if your goal is to try and lose weight, then you need to accept the trade off for performance, at
Yeah.
least during that time that you're trying to lose weight. And then obviously also then acknowledge that you need to stop being in a calorie deficit when you're happy with your weight and then fuel well to perform. Um,
Hmm.
Sometimes, like you said, people probably always keep that mindset and outlook. And even if they're not losing weight anymore, they're still underfueled.
Yeah.
And then that just leads to injury and illness pretty quickly.
But what about you? You mentioned now that you focus more on fueling before, during, and then proteins after. If you were to be even more specific on, I'm sure there are different meals that you're having, but like in general, or an example, what would it look like before your workout? How would you prepare with your nutrition? Also during, and what are you eating or drinking just after?
So the best example is probably like before a morning threshold session. So I'd wake up around 3 hours before, have some porridge. So a lot of oats and honey. Um, and then an hour later, so about 2.5 hours before, I'd have a bagel. And then an hour before, I'd usually have like a banana or like a cereal bar or like a energy chew or a gel. And then during the session, I'll also have a carb mix or a gel. If it's a gel, I'll have it halfway through. If it's a carb mix, I'll sip it throughout. And then afterwards, I'll usually finish the carb mix if I've not finished it, have a banana, and then have a meal literally straight away. And if I can't have a meal, I'll have a recovery shake, which has carbohydrates and protein in. Um, yeah, and obviously on a double threshold day, that then has to progress into the evening as well. So lunch will be massive, and then it'll be a similar pre-session fueling as I had before. So from the banana and then cereal bar, and then afterwards will be the same, and during will be the same again. So a lot of calories. I think on a double threshold day, looking around 5,000 calories. Um, I don't know how that breaks down across the day, but it's a lot of food, and a lot of water as well. I try to hydrate around that as well. I've noticed a massive difference in how tired I feel in the afternoon if I don't hydrate around the session in the morning. Like a drastic difference, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's an interesting take, I think, especially for a lot of the marathon runners who are like having a full-time job, and maybe they have the runs in the afternoons, right? And they're too tired to maybe even get out there. And even if they get out there, they don't have that energy. And maybe that can be solved by obviously the fueling, but also just making sure you're hydrated throughout the day.
Yeah, it's something I didn't really appreciate until recently, and especially doing like double thresholds more consistently. If I've been dehydrated after a session and not drank enough, now I've really started to notice a pattern of how terrible I feel, like just tired, like just really tired. And eating food and having carbohydrates doesn't solve it, and having caffeine doesn't solve it. So it's just been the most obvious thing to change, but I still am
Mm.
guilty of it. Like today,
Yeah.
I did a long run, not drank enough since. I'm feeling very tired.
Yeah. But there's also one thing that I know that you take. I don't know if you take it before your threshold workouts, but like harder sessions, I'm sure. Numio, and I I got some products from them. I just started testing it, so I'm just very curious about it. Not sponsored or anything. I know that you are, but what has your experience been working with that product, and do you feel like that has changed your training and both recovery and performance anyway?
So I want people to maybe know that I'd answer this the same regardless of if I was sponsored. I know that's probably hard to um, believe because obviously I'd have to say something nice, but for me, I take it before an evening threshold and then before long runs and before hard sessions. So 3 times a week usually. And this might be placebo, this might be the effects or a combination. But whenever I take it, I feel like I'm just, I don't even know how to describe it. I just feel like I'm ready or like I can handle a harder effort or sustain an effort for longer. And also, I've noticed taking it also, it's the same as taking beetroot shots. Do you only almost take something that feels healthy, you automatically feel healthier and fresher. And that's definitely a feeling as well. Um, I mean, I've taken it for the Valencia 10K at the weekend. That went really well. My training's been going really well. So, although it's hard to directly associate something to improve or for those improvements, it's definitely, again, a pattern in appearing that when I take it, I seem to, at least on average, perform better. Of course, some days are still bad. They can't just magically solve everything. But it's definitely something that I'm happy I've got as part of my kind of pre-race, pre-session routine. And at the end of the day, I think even if it doesn't change the session, I think there's some studies at the minute about adaptations as well, which has made me take it more. So before I was just taking it before hard sessions, whereas now long runs and thresholds as well because of the adaptation benefits. Um, so yeah, for me, it's a great product. I mean, I just look at the other people who have it, like Andreas Holmgren. If he's taking it, then I should be taking it, regardless of whatever it says. Um, but yeah, honestly, that was 100% authentic. There's no sponsored
I,
words coming out my mouth there.
I think that a good reason to believe you when you say that it's authentic is also that I asked you an open question before, like before that question about Nomeo. I asked you what you would usually typically eat or drink before the workouts, and you were referring to threshold and you didn't mention it. I think that you also like know that if you were to bring that up, it sounds like a sponsored thing, right? Like, and I think that it's also the kind of product where what I appreciate about them as well is that when I was in contact with them, they were like we want you to try this product first and figure out if you like it and if it works for you. And if you do, we can look at working together. And that is something that I think is pretty rare, because it would have been so easy for them to say, okay, here are some products, please talk about us on the podcast, whatever. But instead they're kind of flipping it to me having to like it before. So I totally believe you. And I'm also of the impression that athletes at the level that you are at, you wouldn't really use things that you didn't believe in, right? That's the same whether it's watches or any nutrition. It doesn't matter how much money you get from them if you're not running fast. So uh, I totally believe you, and I definitely think that the listeners will too. So um, I'm still curious more about your backstory, because we got now to 1920 where you kind of started figuring these things out, and we have 6 to 7 years between then and now. So what happened between those years, and like when you figured these things out, how quickly did you feel the progress?
So I was with my old coach until 2024. So during that time, I was still following his training system while still learning. So that became more, it was more of a conversation about my training where I could say, can I do this? Can I do this? And I was still growing the volume over that time anyway. So even some stuff that I wanted to implement, I probably couldn't, because I'm not just going to jump from, I think, probably 50 miles a week or 40 miles a week to 120 miles a week. It's not going to work. So during that time, it was still just learning. And I think you take for granted sometimes how much you pick up without even realizing. And I could say I read this very good article, very specific article, but it's probably not the case. It's just seeing things, trying it, trial and error, and just really understanding what works for me. Um, so that just progressed. And then 2024, I'd still progressed each year, but that was just from doing more volume and being consistent with that volume. I think COVID definitely helped because there was no races, so it just allowed me to train constantly. And I wasn't even training hard; it was just more volume. And I was training with a marathon runner who ran 210 when 210 was actually really crazy. And now it seems
Yeah.
no one runs 210, but um, and I started doing his sessions, and I was just automatically very good at them. So clearly, genetically, it's where I'm suited anyway. But I also noticed that I started getting a lot better from doing those sessions. So then for me, it was obvious that high volume training really does work for me. And then that was just adapting it again. And I briefly joined New Balance in 2024. And then after that, I left and fully coached myself from August 2024. And straight away, I knew exactly what I was doing, and that was going to be double threshold. Um, so since then, I just adapted that and then worked with Jordan Donnelly, who was at On and now at Nike, to kind of advance that further to suit me more with some long run sessions and some other specific stuff. And that's kind of where I'm at now. But it's just been a gradual progression where, you don't change too much in one go, but you always try to see how you can maximize what works for you and the adaptations you can get. And that's just been the same. And it probably will be the same again this year, where I look to see ways I can maybe do more, or if that's not running, that might be in the gym or coming to altitude or whatever else.
Yeah, and it all makes sense then, that because I'm pretty sure I started following you like a year ago or a bit more than that, when I was really like trying to get invested in the running space. And from my perspective, it's looked like it's just been such a good year for you with a lot of progress. You've been winning races, you've been doing so well. How has that been like for you, going from that, like the fall of 2024, you started coaching yourself, like you said, and then having this progress now? Um, is it like, are you, do you have to pinch yourself at times when looking back at this year?
Yes, but I think it goes away very quickly. Like the finish line or the day of the race, it's usually like you feel amazing. But then the day after, you have to come to terms with now you've got to try and beat that. Um, so yeah, to be honest, this last 12 months, I guess actually since since I paced the Malaga half marathon in December of 2024, since then my mindset's been completely different. And the Valencia 10K last year, and then the half marathon in Valencia, and then the 10K in Valencia. It's all Spanish races or Valencia races. It's definitely shifted my mindset in terms of where I can go in running. But also when you do one of those races, it also gives you more belief and justification to then continue what you're doing and continue your training. And I think that automatically just helps you. It makes you hungrier as well. So it makes you look for more reasons to improve, more ways to improve. Um, so yeah, it's been unbelievable as someone who, and I ran 29:10 for a 10K in 2021, and that felt like my limit at the time. And now to run a minute and 30 seconds, 32 seconds quicker is unbelievable to me. So yeah, it's been a good year. It's been a good year.
Yeah, and then you started like, because that was one thing that I remember when I first reached out to you. I knew that you were training for this half marathon, or like that you were kind of starting to move up in distance. Uh, Approaching the half marathon, coming from, if we can call it it is the shorter distances, but still not short distances like that. Uh, what was it like to start training for that kind of distance?
Very natural, because I already was training basically like that anyway. There was very few changes that I made, and it was almost an accidental change where I did my first half marathon and was like, oh wait, that was actually really good. I didn't expect it to be that good. And that was just purely from basically doing what training I was already doing. Like when I did my first half, I wasn't training for the half. I was just training to be a faster runner. And just the way my philosophy is, or I can't really call it my philosophy because it's inspired by other people. Um, but it was very easy. Like high volume training suits quite well for the half, especially double threshold, because a lot of it is that half marathon pace. So it was pretty natural progression, to be honest.
But how was it then when you were like, although that felt natural, and I don't know what your expectations were, but for the half in Valencia, like the race you did is amazing, really, really good.
Hmm.
Did you surprise yourself at all?
A bit, yeah. Um, and to be honest, I took that surprise with me afterwards in terms of preparing for this Valencia 10K. Um, because the training I'd done leading up to that, I knew it was a lot of running and a lot of, so I did heat training during that block and a lot of volume. So I knew that I was in a really good place, but none of the training felt good, and none of the training was fast enough to say I was in that shape. But I think you get to a point where when you do high volume, you almost accept that you're not going to be fast until race day, or until you do the specific stuff close to race day, because it's just building fitness, and you're technically not a very good runner whilst you're fatigued and don't have really good mechanics. As fit as I might be, my running economy wasn't good enough. Um, so I was a bit shocked, but I knew that it's happened before where I've gone into a race just doing high volume and then really sharp and aggressively closer, and then it was worked out. Um, but yeah, looking back, I wanted to run sub 62, but the way the race panned out, the time itself probably wasn't that much of a shock, but beating who I did on the day
Mhm.
was a big shock.
And you've built like quite the following on social media as well, and we've been able to, because you have almost 80,000 followers, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
78, I think.
And we've been able to follow you through this like build up through that journey. Like I said, although you might not have felt super good, like some of the workouts that you've done from the outside, we could tell that you were in good shape. So your kind of baseline was pretty high. Uh, eh, does it affect you at all to have so many people, first of all, maybe having some opinions about it, but also maybe most importantly, the expectations that were built up through that big platform and your shape and heading into that race?
To be honest, no. Um, I don't really. I'm usually generally in life pretty just. level completely. There's never really too many highs and lows, and that's the same if someone says something on a video, or if a video gets really good views or terrible views, it's usually the same. So for me, it wasn't that's the case. I think also because I'm generally quite open on social media, whereas if I have a bad session, if I have a bad race, I'll just say I've had a bad session or a bad race. So it was the same there, where you don't really go into it with pressure because there's no pressure built up. Like if I have a good race, I think people will support me in the comments, and if I have a bad race, I think they'd support me in the comments the same. I obviously acknowledge there's quite a lot of people out there who wouldn't get that. Like I think Keely Hodgkinson actually obviously was injured for most of the year, and then came third at the World Championships, not first. And all the comments were like, "Oh, maybe if you spent less time going to events and like doing all this other stuff." And it's like, I think the Olympic champion kind of knows. I don't have that. Maybe that's because I'm not as famous, or anywhere near as famous. But for me right now, no, there's never any pressure to perform well based off social media. Everyone's always really been supportive, and I think you'll stay that way because I'm never trying to be someone else or try to set up expectations. I'm always pretty much just going to say how it is, and
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people appreciate that sometimes because authenticity is kind of the way everyone should be. And I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of runners maybe leave too much out and don't really give people the information or the openness they deserve on social media. Like the reason I do social media is to share this stuff, and that'll be the highs and the lows, regardless of how people react.
No, it's definitely something that I really appreciate about your platform and the way you are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that everyone I've enjoyed interacting with or watching, they're as open as possible on social media. I think it's a good word.
Hmm. But what about like if we look at the competition? Because you were the number one Brit in that half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would also say that 2025 was a big year for the UK in terms of running, and especially if you look at the marathon distance and also the half marathon with you. Alex Yee, for instance, like big profile, is kind of just building up to the full marathon in Valencia. You're racing against him, you're beating him, you're now preparing for your first full marathon. And Alex Yee is like the big talk. And it's like, I feel like he's probably one of the biggest names in marathon running right now because of what he did in Valencia. Do you feel the pressure, or do you ever compare yourself to that now that you are building up to a marathon in April?
Maybe not now, because in April I'm not going to go for a 206. Maybe in the next marathon, because I'm hopefully going to do Valencia this year as well. That'll be a bit different. But the first marathon is definitely just about going through the process of running a marathon and trying to. I think my target's going to run sub 2:09:30, which on paper should be manageable, at least the speed of. So yeah, that's a lot less daunting than trying to compete with Alex in the 206 range. So at the minute, I'm not really thinking about it. But obviously, at the same time, I kind of have to know that I did beat Alex in the half, and I've got a faster 10K PB than him now. He is the Olympic champion in the triathlon, so it's kind of sure. But yeah, I'd be. It's not really a competition, but seeing him run that and seeing Phil Sessman run 207 makes me believe that I can also then go and run those times. So I think British distance running as a whole, I think it's improved so much. One, because we're starting to train a lot more and starting to copy other European countries. But also, once you see someone else run really fast, you have that belief that you have to run that fast. And also that applies to the training. And, when you see someone run really well and the way they train, it almost makes you raise that level as well. So I think seeing Rory Leonard run 27:40 or 27:38 in the Valencia 10K last year, he was by himself as a Brit, other than Charlie Wheeler, who kind of came through the field. This year, I was in a group with probably 5 Brits and 5 Irishmen running, and that's probably all because we saw what Rory did last year and was like, well, if Rory did it, and we've got to go for it this year, and that's just distance running in the UK right now is just constantly improving because it almost needs to as well, because I did think it got left behind a bit by a lot of other European countries and the USA recently. So it's finally good that we're playing catch up.
Yeah, it must be super inspiring.
Yeah, it is. It's also a pain because you get better at running
Yeah.
and then everyone else does. So it never gets any easier to make teams, even though you are getting better. So I guess it's the saying of the a rising tide lifts all boats or whatever it is. Just unfortunate that it just can't be just me who's getting better. But again, that wouldn't be very fun. So I
Yeah.
guess it's fine.
Well, I'm curious then because, like you said, you guys must be doing a lot of things right, and now that you have a half marathon block behind you, and you said that you were already kind of training a bit like that, I'm curious then, do you feel the same about the marathon, or do you have to change a lot now that you are like 3 months away, I guess, from a marathon?
So naively, probably I do feel the same. Yes, um, that might come back to bite me. But so during this 10K build, my training was a double threshold day on a Tuesday, um, a specific session on a Friday, and then a long run session on the Sunday. And that long run session was usually 32K, and that was 32K of running 3 minute kilometers or 250 per kilometer at like 30K, and it was constant work. So fartleks, I did 7 by 2K on 1K off, and then had like a 1K jog, and then did some 5 by 400. So I've done a lot of stuff that sort of, I guess, hard work in a long duration of a session. I've done quite a lot of progressive runs. So really, I'm already kind of there with the long run. I don't think I'd want to get over 32K that often. And then also, I've been doing a midweek long run. I think double threshold already applies to the marathon anyway. So a lot of the stuff I've been doing is already trying like is getting me there. It's probably just going to be more focus on that long run session, and then also I might look at increasing the threshold, um, maybe to 15K, 16K in the morning. But I'm not sure how that will work because I've not tried it yet. But mostly like 200K weeks. It's pretty hard not to get ready for marathon racing if you're doing 200K weeks. So I'm pretty much there. I think it's just some fine tuning.
So what does the rest of the week look like? First of all, I think it's really cool to hear that this is like has been your approach already, and that you can kind of just keep doing this and it will most likely kind of just convert to the marathon distance. But if you were to quickly take us through the rest of the week, you did mention some of the workouts, but your easy runs, and also kind of back to what you were saying about the easy runs just getting slower and slower. We know your PRs, we know like your average pace for those distances. So I'm also curious to hear the pace you're running your easy runs at.
So for the next few weeks up here, it's a bit different because my training's a bit different to train with other people, and also the Norwegians run quicker on their easy runs, and I'm running with them. So whatever people see on my Strava for the next few weeks isn't 100% what I do at home. If you're thinking I'm just making it up, because if someone heard what I say and then checks my Strava, they'll see something different. Um, but it's usually a double easy day on Monday with strides and heat training in one of those sessions. So it'll be around in the 420 per kilometer range for both of those. Usually 14K in the morning with strides, and then 10K of heat training in the evening. Tuesday will be double threshold. Wednesday will be a 24K long run at the same pace, so around 420. And then a heated 10K in the evening, again 420, but that's usually run a bit quicker at the start to warm up and then run slower. Thursday would be just a double 12K, so 12K, 12K. One will be heat training, again 420s. Friday would be specific session, and then an easy run, which is heat training again at 420s. In the evening, Saturday will be 10K, 10K, one of those heat training, usually the morning, and then strides in the evening. And then Sunday will be a long run session. So I think I probably average between 420 and 320 and 330 for that long run if you break it all down, but it's
Mhm.
a lot of varying paces in there.
And then you mentioned heat training several times a week here, uh, and it seems like that has been something that's been working for you. What are the benefits that you've felt after starting to do that?
To be honest, there's been no like. I guess there's nothing what you take or do, and then you just go, oh, yep, that's definitely that. I've ran PBs while I've been heat training, so I guess um, just overall fitness is probably the correct way to look at it. I feel like obviously it contributes, but it's not just a direct contributor. I definitely performed proportionately well in Valencia half when it was hot, and I think obviously the heat training helped there. But I've noticed a boosted like an improvement in my endurance, but that could just be running 200k a week. So you never know. But I've definitely got fitter whilst I've been heat training. It's just hard to tell if it was or solely down to the heat training, but I think it definitely contributed.
Yeah, I'm very curious about heat training. I feel like, I mean, there are such individual preferences on that. Or some people are reacting very well to it. Some people are not. I heard about this guy the other day who was just like in a mood the whole time throughout those months where he did it. And as soon as he stopped doing it, people were like, "What happened to you? You're all of a sudden all cheery and happy." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm not going back to heat training." But then you have others who are like, "Yeah, I'm never going back to not doing it."
Yeah, I unfortunately, because it is very miserable, but unfortunately, I don't see a time when I don't do it if I'm not at altitude. Um, so yeah, it's quite sad because it is awful. I might try and look at doing more passive rather than active heat training because sitting in a sauna is nicer than being in a heat suit or running lots of layers on the treadmill. But yeah, it's not fun. I can understand why people might be miserable whilst doing it.
Yeah. But then there's a very interesting thing that I feel like listening to you now and with the mileage that you have, but also your training in general. Like you said, you've been doing longer distances, long runs, and you're still performing so well on it, like in the 10K. And what is your biggest takeaway from that? Because I feel like you hear about 10K runners and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to wait with that marathon training until like later in my career. And then we have you're doing this already and you are performing better also in what a marathoner would call a short distance.
I think you could probably get 99% of the 10K like fitness out of marathon training. And then, so all that hot, high volume training. So the way I've been training, what I just mentioned, I think maybe the specific session on the Friday got a bit more intense and a bit shorter as I got closer to the 10K. And then the last week and a half or like 2 weeks, I did the hill session, which was 20 by 200 hills, so faster. I did um, some thresholds and some 400s, and then some thresholds and some 200s in one session. I repeated that again, just a tiny different variation, so some fours and some twos, and then some faster K reps. So like, I think my final harder session before the 10K was 6 by K, and then four fours and eight twos, and that was going down from 3 minutes down to 2:45, and then doing 63 down to 60, and then running 30 down to 28. So it was very much just keeping the base training or like the aerobic fitness as high as possible, and then being quite aggressive in the last 2 weeks in terms of specific work. If I really wanted to truly optimize it for just that one 10K race, I would probably bring the specific work a bit harder in December. But for me, around Christmas, I travel a lot to see different families, so it was kind of hard to do that. Um, but yeah, like I said, I think my training usually can get me anyway, 99% of the way there for a 10K race.
Mhm. No, it's really interesting to see. And I also find it fascinating because for you now heading into the marathon, like for most of us who are like heading or learning how to do marathons at an older age, we have such a different approach to it because for me right now, I'm like running my threshold workouts at a higher speed, then I was able to do almost like at maximum speed. So if I did like 1K and try to run as fast as I could like a year ago, that might actually be my threshold pace today. But for you, you are running your races and a lot of your workouts already at a faster pace than you will probably ever have to do in a marathon, and you'll still be super fast. How much of a benefit do you think it is heading into the marathon and knowing that you're pretty comfortable at that pace that you're running your 10K in now?
Massively. Um, I think even for the 10K, so this year a lot of focus obviously has been on aerobic, but mechanical efficiency, whether that's strides, plyometrics. I think even if it's maybe not on paper or the science of you be more efficient and utilizing energy better, just mentally, if you feel like you're straining early in a half or a marathon, then that's going to mentally wear on you throughout the whole race and ultimately mean that you're going to break earlier, I think. So just being comfortable at a pace, I think drastically helps, even if that doesn't mean you're actually saving more energy. But usually it does because your speed reserve, it's just easier proportionally. If you can run faster, it usually means that your mechanics are better. So it definitely helps. And just having a wider gap just means you can relax more and feel relaxed.
Mhm.
And I think that's the key for longer races is to be relaxed for as long as possible. And if you're not, then it's a very long way to struggle. And I think usually that just ends up badly, or ends badly, sorry.
No, that totally makes sense. And what you're touching on there is also like one of the questions that I have for you. That is, how much do you focus on form and technique when you're running or in training?
So I'm quite bad at um, acting how I think I am in my head, if that makes sense. So if I
Yeah.
in my head go, relax your arms, I'm probably relaxing them way too, like not enough, or sorry, I'm relaxing them way too much. Um, for example, in the gym today, I was doing gym with some of the guys, and he came over and was like, "You need to make sure you're really snapping down." We're doing step ups, and he was like, "Make sure you really bring that leg up fast." And what he was telling me, I thought I was already doing, and it was only after he was like, "Yeah, you need to do this." I was like, "Oh," and then you realize. So for me, I don't like to do it whilst running because I know that I'll act in a way that I shouldn't. So everything in terms of mechanical efficiency comes from a point of doing drills or strength training to then get that result. And it's the same when, people talk about you stop overstriding or increase your cadence. The way I improve my mechanics or increase my cadence is through drills and speed work, not through just trying to do it. Because I think almost always that'll be running wrong. Um, so it's very important for me to do the right core, do the right mobility, do the right gym, do sprints, plyometrics, and that should result in a more efficient form. If not, then I'd have to go and see a specialist and really get that dialed in and let them look at it. I shouldn't have said him then, but it's because my last specialist was a guy. I'm not being sexist. Um, so just get them to look at it and really give you instructions or clear instructions rather than you just thinking you're doing the right thing. Because I've definitely fallen into a trap. If you look at my form from 2 years ago, I had one arm which was like high and one arm which was low, and I never realized. And it was just because in my brain I was running with relaxed arms, and for some reason one was in a completely different place, and I never knew. And that just leads to inefficiency. So it's important to make sure you do it right rather than just what you think feels right.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on there is that is my last question on your training, and that is the strength training and core training that you are talking about, and also the drills. How much do you do of that every week, and how important is that to you?
I should be doing a bit more. So what I'm going to say now is what I set myself. It's never usually um, what I do because if something goes out my training, it's usually gym or core or strength training. So I try to do core on Mondays and then try to do um, strength training on Wednesdays. And then Thursdays I do plyometrics and sprints and hurdle work. And then I try to do strides on Saturdays and then another strength training session on Sundays and then core again on Friday. that's my ideal week. It's usually one of those each, just because it, again, it gets later on in the day and I'm like, oh, I forgot to do that, and then I'd rather go to bed than be in the gym at 10 o'clock at night because I forgot to do gym. But I always try to get it in because it is very important. Reducing injury risk, but also just making you a more efficient runner. I think it's one of the biggest benefits I've had. Again, Joe, going back to when I said there was only a few things that can see an instant change and improvement, doing gym was definitely one of those, and especially plyometrics, Joe, that just building that leg tension and being able to produce a more efficient, more powerful stride. It helps a lot. So it's very important in my training.
Yeah, thanks. I think that most runners can relate to what you're saying about
Um,
preaching it, but struggling to really do it because it does become that thing that you throw out the window first. Because if you missed a run and you have the work strength training later on, you will be like, oh, I need to prioritize this run. I'm gonna do that. So totally makes sense. I don't think you're alone feeling like that. I feel like we touched on so many great things here, and I really appreciate everything that you shared. Uh, I just want to bring it back to what we started with, like with your altitude training, where you are at now. Uh, what is the reasoning or motivation behind this 3 week altitude camp that you're currently doing?
um, so one of the big things for me is surround yourself with people who you want to be like or who are better than you. Um, so I was speaking to Henrik Ingebrigtsen in December, talking about trying to train more. Obviously, kind of basically inspired my training, the Ingebrigtsens. And he just mentioned come out to Sierra Nevada because after Valencia, because he was going to Valencia, and just see how you like it, how it is. And then obviously then assess opportunities from there. It's kind of like the no wheel thing. It has to be a good fit first, right? Um, so the 3 weeks is purely just because I've never been this high before. I didn't want to stay for longer, and also it's expensive. Um, but then also just to see how I train with different people and see how if I fit in somewhere. And also it's just a great opportunity, like surrounding myself with runners who I've looked up to all my career. And being in a place like this is just something that I can't take or can't take for granted. And, need to make the most of while I can. Like I think we said it probably off the podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You appreciate it after, like how worthwhile these things are. Like the last camp I went on in St. Moritz was an unbelievable experience, and so far, as hard as some parts have been in terms of the altitude, it's again being surrounded by a whole new group of people, like a new challenge. It's been great, and all the people here. Um, I've been very fortunate. I think with most runners I've met have been really good people. I'm not sure if it's a trait runners have, but it's everyone here who was part of the group. So like Moa, Magnus, Frederick, Henrik, and Jane Solomon's here as well. They're all like really good people and really easy to get along with. And me coming in, they all know each other, speak Norwegian and Swedish, and there's a Danish guy as well, Jacob, who could all speak, like even though it's a different language, it's the same language.
Hmm.
They can all communicate well with each other, and then I'm just there, sat on a table, and get me involved, start speaking English and things like that. So it was very easy for them to not sort of allow me to have a good time, and they've been very welcoming so far. So it's been a good experience.
I'm glad to hear that. Glad that us Norwegians, or that they are representing Norway in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I really should have been born Norwegian based off all my personality traits and who I like in sport and things like that. But yeah, I think Scandinavians definitely people the rest of the world can learn from in a lot of ways, I think. And I've
Yeah.
learned more whilst being here.
I guess I can't say yeah because I am Norwegian myself. So I will just say thank you, and that's nice of you to say.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. I think
Yeah.
you're always ahead of the game as well in training and in everything, really.
Yeah, it's definitely been, especially like looking at the last year with triathlon and running and cross country skiing. Obviously, like there've been a lot of really good things coming from there. So it's been very interesting, and I always feel a little proud when I read like the Norwegian method, because it's like, oh, that's our country, like 5 million people, but we're still known for that.
Yeah, I'd say Norway is probably the best endurance country in the world. Um, I think that's fair to say, especially when you
Yeah.
consider genetics. Like Norwegians aren't exactly genetically the most gifted athletes, but they outperform pretty much every other country, and that's purely down to training, 100%, and mindset, I think, as well.
Yeah, you're probably right about that, especially like that training and the mentality, definitely. But more so, I think the training and everything that's put into that, like there's so much science going on, or like research in Norway on these things, and it's highly prioritized. So it does make sense, I guess.
You also your sayings are quite funny as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure you've noticed some of them, and now I'm engaged to an American, so I'm starting to learn like, oh, that does not work in English at all. But it is funny with some of them where I'm like, yeah, this doesn't work.
Yeah. I was trying to learn 'cause I started Duolingo trying to learn Norwegian, and I thought,
Hmm.
"They can all speak brilliant English. There's no point me trying to do this, so I'll just learn all the fun stuff, all the swear words and all the sayings."
Yeah,
Um, so, like, my favorite one so far is "owl in the moss." I can't remember what that is in
yeah,
Norwegian, but,
hmm,
like,
yeah. That means that there's something suspicious going on, something fishy.
yeah, it's good. They're really good humor as well. Not to completely just glaze Norwegians over and over again, but yeah, they're good people.
Well, I think that's a great way to end the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time in the middle of your training camp. And I also know that you're coaching, right? So I'm sure people can hit you up, or the what is it called, the
March
coaching.
March on training. So,
Hmm.
we've got marathon plans on there, half marathon plans, 5K, 10K, everything like that, and I think, uh, I want to really try and build out coaching as much as possible this year where maybe obviously from a financial perspective, it's quite an easy, way to earn money, which is really important in athletics because there's not much going around, but I also think it's important that people who actually know what they're talking about coach people with the new age of runner and things like that. It's important to me to make sure people get good coaching. So hopefully this year there'll be a lot of new plans and a lot of good things coming. So yeah, I think everything you can find is on my Instagram anyway.
But I also think that this whole conversation kind of proves how easy it would be to trust you with someone's training, right? Like you know what you're talking about, you have the results to show for it. But it's also, you're not one of those athletes where it's like, oh yeah, you just have to run hard and go all the way. And there there's definitely a lot of things going into, like a lot of thoughts, a lot of experience there. So yeah, I totally recommend anyone checking that out after listening to this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think just to end on this, for me, it's like, with that, I always find it really hard sometimes to go on podcasts who maybe aren't as knowledgeable as you or answer questions in comments without giving a really long answer because there's so much nuance in training. And it's very hard to then articulate that in a way where people can either have attention or understand what you're saying. Um, so I think it's important that for as often as possible to explain in full detail um, training and all the nuances and not just say zone two or double threshold work. So hopefully we've done that today.
I definitely feel like we have, and I also appreciate that it's not. I feel like you've been pretty specific instead of being like, yeah, I'm doing a hard day that day. That's like the worst thing that I can hear. Like, I had a hard day, because a hard day can either be a very long run, and that's why it's hard, and it's still low intensity, or it can be like really high intensity, and then I have no idea how to read that.
Yeah, I think people sometimes are deliberately too vague, and I don't know why. Because if they want to do the training, like if anyone listening wants to do the training that I'm doing, then they're more than welcome to do that. And if they want to put that work in, then if they're that good, then great. I
Hmm.
literally, I'm only good at running because I copied other people, and I think that's the whole point. You want to make people better at running. You want to educate people. So I don't understand when people are just secretive for no reason. It seems a bit, I don't know, a bit narcissistic, I think is the word I'm looking for.
I think that is a perfect way to end it. If anyone wants to copy your training, they can, because your success is also copying other people.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Alfie, for coming on the Marathon Podcast. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see how your first marathon will go in April.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I also can't wait. I'm hoping it'll be a good day, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll follow you on Instagram and see. Alfie is currently training with Norwegians. Of course he is. I mean, a lot of good Norwegian runners these days. And speaking of good runners, the elite field at the Boston Marathon was just announced. And dude, we have a lot of things to look forward to, both on the men's and the women's field. It's such an elite field this year. And I can't wait to run it, obviously, but also to see how fast they'll run this year. Because I think that it's not often that we'll see that many good runners on the start. We will actually have some of those runners on the podcast. Some have been there before, hopefully some new ones as well. But already on Monday, we'll have Felicia Pasadin on. She's back on. She was a hit the last time, and we didn't actually talk that much about Boston, but we did talk about everything else and everything that has happened since she was on the podcast last time, because things kind of blew up after that and after the New York City Marathon. Okay, thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate that. And enjoy the rest of your run if this episode didn't cover the whole run. Yeah, again, appreciate you guys. Thank you, and have a good weekend. You'll listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.